So we can go ahead and get started with our event. So before we get started, can I just ask that everyone who's not part of the event, just make sure that you keep your cameras and microphones off, just to make sure that we don't hear any background noise or anything. But hello to everyone who's here. My name is Alyssa, and I'm this year's student president for Surgical Society. This is technically our last event of the school year, as well as our first event in the new committee, so that's really we'll be announcing our new committee in the coming months, but for now, I just want to extend a thanks to my right-hand man, Connor Sheehan, as well as our lovely PR team and members of our education team, particularly Natalia Lakic and Mr. Hussein for making today's event possible. Thank you to all of the audience that are here today, regardless of the location and time zone that you may be tuning in from. I'd like to give particular thanks to the wonderful speakers joining us today, Drs. Lozano and Stickney. Congratulations to you both on your recent graduation and acceptance to such prestigious surgical residencies. Thank you for being with us today, and I wish you both the best in beginning your careers. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us, and hopefully some of us in the audience will be in your shoes in just a few years' time. Finally, I would like to both thank and extend a warm welcome to Professor Camilla Carroll, who's joining us as our faculty president for a second year in a row. Thank you, Prof. Carroll, and I invite you to give tonight's opening address.
Thank you very much, Alisa, and congratulations to you on your election as president of this prestigious organization, the RCSI Surgical Society. It's a great honor and a privilege to be joining you for my final year as president. We achieved an awful lot during the COVID pandemic, and hopefully this year we will have more face-to-face engagement. But the blended scenario has allowed us to reach out to many of our colleagues in other universities in Ireland and also our sister colleges in Bahrain and Malaysia. So I would really like to congratulate our speakers this evening. Not only have they recently graduated as doctors from the RCSI School of Medicine, but they've also matched to prestigious surgical training programs in North America. And I look forward to hearing their thoughts on how to, and I also look forward to following their careers and someday listening to them as surgical faculty wherever they choose to take up their final role. So without further ado, back to you, President of the RCSI Surgical Society. Good evening.
Hi everyone. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you as well.
Perfect. So hi everyone, my name is Isra Hussein. I'm one of the educational officers for the 2021-2022 year. I'm really excited to start this event with two amazing speakers, Dr. Christopher Lozano and Dr. Zach Stickney, who volunteered their time and agreed to do this event at such short notice. It's been a really tough year for everyone, and especially North American students, with electives canceled and the match being very uncertain compared to previous years. However, RCSI students are truly amazing. Even this year, we had fellow upperclassmen match into prestigious institutions and programs. I'm hoping that this event gives some advice on how they navigated this year and what advice they have for us. It is with special excitement that I'm pleased to welcome our first speaker, Dr. Christopher Lozano, who graduated from RCSI Medicine class of 221. Prior to RCSI, he attended the University of Toronto and earned a bachelor's degree in physiology. He has a long-standing interest in neuroscience and has completed research in neuroimaging, brain simulation, and neurosurgery. At RCSI, Chris was a member of the GEM program and was involved in SimSat and Neuroscience. He is currently matriculating in the neurosurgery residency program at the University of Toronto this upcoming fall. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Christopher Lozano.
Hi there. Everyone can see me and hear me?
Yes, we can.
I will share my screen. Okay, everyone can see that?
Yep, it looks good.
Great. So thank you very much for that really kind introduction and the kind words from everyone. I'm really happy that I was reached out to speak, and I'm definitely happy to share whatever wisdom I've gained along the road. My name is Chris. As I said, I just graduated from RCSI, and I'll be attending the University of Toronto for the neurosurgery residency program. I'm originally from Toronto in Canada. I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Toronto. Then I went to the RCSI GEM program starting in 2017. As the intro mentioned, I've had a long history in the neurosciences, and I sort of always knew that I wanted to do neurosurgery, and that's brought me to where I am today. So just jumping straight into it, in terms of electives, as you're all aware, COVID really had a negative impact on us. I had a number of electives lined up in Canada as well as in the States, but these were all canceled due to COVID. I was able to sort of scrape together a few things. So I did an observership at Queen's University here in Canada in neurosurgery, and I did that for 3 weeks. And as an observership, I wasn't really allowed to do a lot of things like on paper. Like according to the hospital, I wasn't insured to take care of patients, so I couldn't really do any procedures or assist in patient care. But I still got some good exposure to neurosurgery in Canada, and the supervisor that I was working with was able to kind of get a feel for my level of knowledge and my level of competency. So he wrote me a reference letter for my applications. And then I also did neurosurgery at Beaumont for about 6 weeks in total. And this was a really great experience, and I learned a lot on those rotations. And then I also did neurology at Beaumont and the Mater, because neurology was my backup if I didn't match into neurosurgery. So obtaining electives, I won't go through this in exhaustive detail because there are good resources that RCSI has to offer in terms of obtaining electives. The biggest thing that I would point your attention to if you're interested in going to Canada, just be well aware of the deadlines ahead of time, and the AFMC portal is where you're going to find all that information. RCSI definitely has good resources on this, so make sure to go to the elective night in next fall. In the US, I'm sure Zach will talk about this, but there's basically a few different avenues to get electives. This year, in light of COVID, a lot of our colleagues got electives through these sort of third-party organizations, which tend to deal with like private hospitals or private practices, which are a bit more flexible with allowing students. So if you're having trouble getting electives, I encourage you to look at these sort of third-party institutions like AMO opportunities or these different things. And then in Ireland, obtaining electives is a lot easier of a process because you are RCSI affiliated, so you can basically get any consultant to take you on at an RCSI hospital, assuming that it fits within your schedule and SE2. So preparing for electives, this is very specialty dependent. My recommendation would be to start sort of studying for electives throughout SE1. And what I mean by this is like maybe get a textbook that's designed for students in the specialty of your choice, or try to look for pre-made Anki cards. So for example, if you're studying for Step 2 CK and you're interested in general surgery, do Step 2 CK decks that cover general surgery, and that should help you prepare. If you're studying from like a textbook, you're going to want to focus on high yield things like anatomy and management of emergencies. No one's going to really expect you to know the steps of like a procedure, for example, but they will expect you to know like relevant anatomy, and they just want to make sure that you're safe. So like management of emergencies, like acute stuff in the ED, like MI, pneumothorax, things like that. That's the kind of stuff they expect you to know. And then you can also get a practice suture kit. So what to expect during electives? In Ireland, the elective experience is a lot different than it is in North America. In Ireland, electives are much more relaxed, and it's very much up to you to get out what you want from it. And what I mean by that is no one's going to tell you to, come in early or stay late or be on call. You don't have really patient responsibility to yourself. Usually, it'll be the intern or the SHO or the reg who's actually, managing patients on a day-to-day basis. Whereas in North America, as a clerk, like an elective student, you essentially act as an intern at that level. So, you'll have your own patients. You'll be expected to admit them, order investigations, come up with a management plan, and discharge them eventually. You'll be on call. You'll have to hold the pager. You'll be staying overnight in the hospital. And obviously, I mentioned I didn't do my own electives in North America, but this is, what I've heard from other people. And my brother is actually a third-year medical student at the University of Toronto, and on his rotations, this is the kind of stuff that they expect of him. So advice for electives, on day one, I recommend you shadow the intern or who's ever the most junior member of your team. They're closest to you, so they'll probably be, kind and happy to show you the ropes. Once you sort of get into the swing of things, I encourage you to show up early, go over the lab findings and imaging of your patients, and do this before everyone rounds, so that way when you do round, you can bring these things up, and people will be impressed that you know what's going on. Throughout the day, you want to run the list. What basically this means is you go through each patient on your patient list and flag sort of what's going on, which patients need investigations, which patients are going to theater, which patients need to be discharged, things like that. And then you also want to take initiative to do scut work. And this is a term that's thrown around a lot, especially in North America. This is essentially manual labor that the residents don't enjoy doing. But as a student, you're eager and you want to learn, so you're happy to do these things like writing progress notes, discharge summaries, and if you're in Ireland especially, you'll be doing a lot of bloods, putting in IV cannulas, NG tubes, things like that. And then for surgery specifically, if you have a case list that you know is going to be going on in the next few days, you definitely want to read up on those cases beforehand and try to kind of familiarize yourself with the anatomy and things like that. And then just some general tips that I've sort of picked up from people that I've heard from residents is you never want to complain of being like tired or sore, because imagine you've been doing this for like a week or two, but the resident has been doing this for like years. Don't engage in banter with the residents. If they're making jokes with each other, it's not really your place to joke around with them. You're not sort of in their group yet as a student. And then I really emphasize this: be friendly and nice to everyone, especially the nurses. So this is something that I find RCSI doesn't really teach, and this is sort of an essential skill that you need to have for electives, not only in Ireland but in North America, is the SOAP note or the progress note. And you can Google this to read each section in depth, but I just put sort of an example here of one that I would write. So you can, I won't go through this exhaustively now, but you can maybe take a screenshot of this or something. And basically, this is just a format that you're going to write every time you round on a patient, you have to write a note. And so you're going to be writing, tens of notes per day. And you just have to get used to like laying out all the information in an easy, concise format, so that the next person that comes along can understand what's going on with this patient. Okay, so now just in the last sort of 5 minutes of my talk, I'll talk about matching. So what do program directors view as important? And here I've just pulled up some data from, this is a survey of program directors specifically in the US. We don't have a similar survey in Canada, but this basically, they surveyed, program directors in different specialties. Like here I have neurosurgery, and they asked them, what are the most important things for selecting applicants for an interview? And so the USMLE Step 1 score is cited by 100% of the survey respondents, and they give it a weight of 4.6 out of 5. So obviously Step 1 is probably the single most important factor for you getting an interview, at least in the US. And then here, this survey is factors for ranking applicants, so actually choosing the applicants, and their performance during the interview is by far, the most important thing, obviously, but there's also other things down there like, interactions with house staff during the interview and visit, and then a big one here would be like your performance during electives, because your elective with a program is essentially like a tryout for their program to see if you're a good fit, if you work hard, if you're knowledgeable, if you're safe, things like that. So you can, I encourage you to go to this link here and just read through what factors are important for your specialty of choice. So in terms of my application and why, I think I matched to Toronto, neurosurgery specifically, for one, I think the most important factor was that they sort of got to know me over many years. I had a very strong connection to Toronto because I did my undergraduate degree there. I had done research before med school in Toronto. And then once I was in RCSI, I did the Keenan Summer Research Program after Gem 1 at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto with a neurosurgeon. That neurosurgeon, for whatever reason, really liked me. And he wrote me a very strong reference letter, I think. I didn't see the letter, but from the way he was talking to me, I got the sense that he really wanted to vouch for me. So I think that played a very important role. The second thing was I had a long track record of interest in neurosurgery, and this is important for any specialty. They want to see that you're really committed to the specialty. So whether it's vascular surgery or general surgery or plastic surgery, like you want to have sort of evidence that you've been interested in that field for a long time. And that can be in the form of research, that can be in the form of being part of societies or other extracurricular activities, things like that. The third one was academics. Obviously, any surgical field is going to be very challenging from an academic standpoint. There's a lot to know, and they want to make sure that the people entering the field are very strong academically. I did all the USMLE exams and the Canadian exams. I did quite well on Step 1, and even though Step 1 isn't considered like a core factor in the Canadian match, I think that my score on Step 1, really sort of stood out, and I would hope that it sort of demonstrated that I'm really willing to work hard and put in a lot of hard work towards learning. And then the final thing was extracurriculars. I've been involved with a number of things in Dublin. I got really into like running, for example. I did the Dublin Marathon, and that was something that came up in my interview a lot. They kept on asking like, oh, like how do you deal with stress, or what do you do in your free time? And I told them a lot about running, and I think they really liked that. This is just a caveat. So obviously, like I mentioned, the most important factor before COVID was really how you performed on your elective, because this is essentially like a tryout for the program. This year was atypical, so I would take, what I'm saying with a grain of salt. Who knows how things are going to be different for your year. And then just a note on interviews. For me, preparation was really important. I started prepping probably like a month out from the beginning of my interviews. I came up with a list of questions. I had like a preset answer for each question with like bullet point answers. And, throughout the month to about a week before, or even like the night before the interview, I just started practicing and really like rehearsing my answers. And I think that it came off like really confident in the interview, and that was something that I think they're really looking for. In terms of what to prepare, you want to be able to answer why this specialty, why this program. They want to know a lot about how you deal with stress, with conflict, with failure. I got asked a lot about like, tell us about a time you failed at something, or tell us about a time you made a mistake and you had to like be upfront about it. And then they like asking these like sort of behavioral scenarios, whether it's something you've done yourself, or they'll sort of do some role play with you where they tell you like, okay, this your attending wants you to like not document that you made an error in the surgery. Like, what are you going to do about that? So they sort of like these behavioral scenarios to see how do you respond to sort of uncomfortable situations. So I think that's probably my time there. So thank you again for inviting me to speak. This was sort of a whirlwind tour of electives and residency. So I'm more than happy to answer questions. And thanks a lot for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christopher Lozano. It was a really informative talk. Now I'm just going to introduce our next amazing speaker. I'm pleased to announce Dr. Zach Stickney, who is an incoming PGY general surgery resident at Bay State Medical Center in Massachusetts. Prior to his residency, he studied bioengineering at Santa Clara University, who attended RCSI for medical school. His interest in general surgery began during rotations after witnessing how the team balanced both the procedural and medical management of their patients. He is hoping to pursue a fellowship in trauma surgery, but is also eager to explore all the niches and opportunities within general surgery. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Zach Stickney.
Thanks for the introduction there. Can you just confirm, can you hear me, and also do you see my PowerPoint up right now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. Thanks, guys, for inviting me to talk today. It was funny, I was saying earlier to these guys, their emails, the first email I got that said doctor on it, so that was pretty weird. But still hasn't sunk in yet, but I'll start very soon here. So you guys kind of got an introduction to me. Zach studied bioengineering. I was a GEM, and I just graduated. I applied to both orthopedics and general surgery this year, and I matched to general surgery at Bay State, which is in Springfield, Massachusetts, kind of like an hour and a bit outside of Boston. So I think one of the big things that people want to talk about was electives. So I just want to go over kind of like my electives, and then we'll talk about kind of how you would get electives. Chris talked on this a little bit, but basically I had kind of 4 electives lined up. I had one at general surgery at Swedish Hospital, which was in Seattle. I had one at the University of Washington in orthopedics, one at University of St. Louis, general surgery, and then Mayo Clinic in Rochester, orthopedics. Unfortunately, because of COVID, all my ortho electives got canceled. I was still able to complete my general surgery job in Seattle, and also slot in a 2-week job at Beaumont with Prof Hill. And Chris, kind of touched on this, but like your electives are a very important part of like you matching, and like you said, like you need your board scores to kind of get to an interview or get to an elective, but your elective is like a working interview. And our year was super weird because we didn't do that. But what I would kind of encourage you to do is, well, one, when you're looking for electives, look for electives kind of a mix of, okay, this is my hometown or this is a reach school, but you also, I think, should include maybe an elective or two at schools where people have matched before or schools where they take IMGs. It's a big step for a school, especially in surgery. Surgery is different than medicine. People in medicine this year at RCSI matched really well to all over the place, but that's because internal med, pediatrics, they're very used to taking international students. Like a lot of the surgical programs have never taken an IMG in the history of ever. So it does you well to do a little research into what schools have taken at least one person, because then they're like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. We could take this guy too. So that's worth considering. So the process for securing your electives, normally you could do kind of like the VSOS portal, Chris said, and you'll have a whole electives talk on that. But then the other thing to think about is, especially if COVID persists and there's weird things happening, go on a website, look at your local hospital. The Swedish hospital that I found, I didn't even know had electives, and I found it a month before it was going to start, after everything I had canceled. So you can kind of throw things together, especially at these kind of smaller local hospitals. And then finally, there are schools that have their own portal, and they tend to just do whatever they want, especially in COVID times. So Mayo ran electives, just not in orthopedics, but they ran electives basically every other specialty. North Carolina, these are all schools that have their own website portal. So they're good ones to kind of set up early, because VSOS can be difficult as an IMG. And I think I already touched on that, but just I would balance getting electives at places where you think you would match because it's a working interview, and then getting a big, a reach school, that would be a great letter of recommendation, but are they serious about taking you? Maybe, but kind of a mix. Okay, so Chris talked about this already. I think the big things is just showing up to surgeries prepared, read some anatomy, and at minimum, you're going to walk down the hall or change into your scrubs, get out your phone, look at the procedure, look at the different approaches, so that when they point to things or they're what is happening here, you have a visual in your head. The big thing about electives and what to do during elective is you need to know how to suture in a scrub, and you might not have done a lot of that recently, and you might not be good, but you need to be kind of at the level where when they say, hey, scrub now, that you can at least go and talk to the nice nurse in the corner and be like, hey, I know how to scrub, it's just been a while, can you just come watch me scrub and make sure I don't do anything wrong? To the level where you can at least figure it out. And if you haven't scrubbed in a while, just watching videos is enough for that. Same with suturing. If you get a suture kit, I think that's important to get a suture kit, and to know how to tie knots also is very helpful. You don't have to be good by any means, but if you show up and they say, hey, can you suture this? And you say, oh, I don't know how to suture, they'll be like, oh, that's fine. And then they'll never offer to just have you suture again, But if the first time you're like, oh yeah, I know how to suture, I'm can you just watch me to make sure I'm doing it right? And then if it's not that great, they'll be like, okay, well, that was crap, but here, I'll show you. And then they teach you. But if you just say, oh, I don't know, they people in a rush, they'll just be like, oh, that's fine. And you'll never learn. So you have to be at a level where you kind of have to be able to jump in at any opportunity where they offer. And the other thing about electives, I would say, is make your intentions known quickly about electives. I mean, the only reason you're at an elective, besides the experience, is your letter of recommendation. So I talked to the one elective I did in North America. I talked to the guy in the first week. I said, I'm really enjoying my time. I really want a strong letter of recommendation from you. If you think I deserve it at the end of this rotation, what can I do to show you that, over the next 4 weeks? Because if you come to them at week, 3.5 and say, hey, I want a letter of recommendation, they're like, well, I never saw you, in a surgical case. I never saw you on the wards. Like, then you're in a bad place. But if he says, okay, or she says, okay, I want to see you do X, Y, and Z before you leave, then you can make sure it happens and you get a good letter of recommendation. And then Chris was, kind of talking about this. You got to be a mix. You have to be really eager, show up early, never be late to anything. You should always be the first one there. You should be bored sitting on the side of the wall when they show up, because, you just have to show that you're someone that's always going to be on time. And then if someone ever says I'm done with this case, but I think my partner has a case in the next room, never be like, oh, I think I'm going to go do this or that. Be like, oh, okay, I'd love to do that, And as a result, during my elective, electives are a tough time. I worked some 17-hour days because people would be like, oh, well, this is happening in the next room and this is happening in the next room. And, use your judgment. You can't work 17 hours every day, but you can, if you say yes to these things, then they'll bring you into more things, and more exposure means a good letter of recommendation. Honesty about your abilities. This is what I was talking about earlier. You have to know the fundamentals of scrubbing and suturing and theater etiquette, sterility. But if you're not sure, you want to say, yes, I can do it, but also, can you watch me do it or help me? Don't say, I don't know how to do it. Say, watch me do it. If you're, like I said with the scrubbing example, if you don't know if there's a difference in how they scrub, there's a new soap on the wall, you don't know how to use it, ask the nurse, just don't do it. Because if they see you doing something wrong, they're going to be like, whoa, this guy's unsafe. So that's my advice there. You have to be, you can't be so timid that they don't include you in things, but if you're not sure, you have to ask for clarification. And Chris was saying don't engage in banter with residents. I agree, that's true. But also make sure that you're a normal human being around the residents. They're also evaluating whether you're someone that they would want to work with for the next 5 years. So, if they get a question wrong in front of the attending and then you answer it right away, oh yeah, I know what that is, they're not going to like you. So just use caution and, try to have them on your team. But I agree, you're not part of their team, so don't engage in kind of too much banter. So that's during electives. For surgery, I think, as Chris showed you with those lists, your boards are hugely important for interviews. As an IMG, they're kind of even more important because they don't really know what your shelf exam. We don't have shelf exams. They don't really know what that RCSI is a good school. So I would say you have to minimum get the average. I mean, there's always exceptions and ways to work around things, but aim for 10 points at minimum above, I think, what the average is for that specialty, So general surgery is 235, so you should be aiming for 240 plus, and the higher you go is better odds. But, you can only do what you can do. Do at least one research project in the field you're interested, ideally more, but every single interview I had, people asked about research, and I had general surgical research. I didn't have orthopedics research, and that really hurt me in my interviews. They were talk about some orthopedic research. I was like, I don't have any, but I'd talk about the general surgery one. They were definitely that's fine, but not impressed. So there's ways to get involved in things Star Surge is something I got involved in. It's a yearly audit at Beaumont. They do basically a huge audit of, mine was respiratory complications after abdominal surgery. You just go in and kind of look up charts and stuff. So that's like an easy way to get involved for people who are doing surgery. I would look up Star Surge. They do it every year. And then for interviewing and actually getting the job, like Chris was saying, boards, scores, CV, huge. But then once you're actually at the interview, it's all about like you as a person and how you handle questions. And one of the big things I would say is definitely talk to your classmates about the interviews and the hard questions they get, because it's amazing. Like, I had someone tell me like, oh, I got asked a question about like, teach me a topic. And they were like, I always just teach a recipe because it's fun and it's easy. It shows that you're like logical thinking. And I was like, okay. And I thought of an example. Next interview I had that exact topic. So it's like, definitely when you're in interview season, collaborate, talk to people about the questions they get, and look on, things like online on Reddit. There are questions that come up over and over again in every specialty. Be interesting. So, having a CV that's full of like clubs that you were like a member that like, like did nothing on, like, is good on paper, but when they're going to ask you about things in the interview, so like be careful. Like, I think it's, especially if you're earlier time in medical school, invest more time in less things. They asked me about, I did Sim Wars. They asked me about this peer mentorship group that I founded, and like I talked a lot about it, and it was clear that I'd like actually spent time on those things. And if they ask you about something, you're like, oh, I like, set up the party for cardio soc, which is what I did for cardio soc, and I didn't include it on my resume because I was just like, I don't want to talk about it. So just think about that. And then finally, in interviews, don't get fooled by zinger questions. They'll ask you something so random, and you're obviously stressed because you're like, I want a job here. And they'll be like, what kind of musical instrument would you be? Or like, how would you handle someone coming into the office and aiming a gun at you? These are literally both questions I've gotten in my interviews. And like, they don't care about your answer. They care about like your ability to not get flustered by these kind of things. If it's a question that's at all involving safety, you can just like think out loud, be like, well, my top priority would be to do this, but I also want to do this. As long as you talk out loud, they don't, and like explain your reasoning, they don't care what your answer is. Because that shows that you're someone that, when confronted with a problem, would logically address it, With like the zinger questions, like what musical instrument would you be? I mean, like, those don't really matter as much. Just being calm and then just like picking something and then just like sticking with it, like they're looking for someone that goes, oh man, I don't know, because then they're like, this person can't just like kind of go with things. So those are kind of the things to look out that can like trip you up on interviews. So closing marks, I think big thing for no matter where you are in your career right now in medical school, one sand dune at a time, going through the process to residency is like a desert with a lot of sand dunes. You can only really focus on one big thing. You can have things going on in the backgrounds. If you're in your first couple of years, like step one is your priority. If you're in the next couple of years, it's step two, then it's your electives. So really don't get so stressed out about everything until it's the time for that, like, wait, it will be all fine. Focus on what you can focus on. Again, if you're serious about a surgical subspecialty, Chris said, you can look online and see the average board scores for specialties. If you don't get the board score you want, it's not impossible, but it tells you, how much you need to study. And it is like, it's a lot of studying to do. So if you want something like orthopedics, neurosurgery, like, you really need to be prepared to give your life to step one or step two. Step one becomes pass fail. And the final thing is be strategic. I mentioned this about where you apply. Apply to schools that you wouldn't normally apply to. Like, and what I'm saying is cast a wide net. I applied like 160 schools, and I think I only got like 6 interviews. It was a hard season for IMG that didn't do any big rotations, but cast a wide net. Apply to places that you think maybe people wouldn't want to go, because that's where they might take IMGs. You can also filter when you get ERAS, which is the tool for applying residency, by how many percent IMG. So if you turn that to 1%, you see every school that's ever taken an IMG in that specialty. You should apply to every one of those schools, because that's the best way to get in somewhere. And yeah, so if you're interested in ortho or general surgery, you're also welcome to reach out to me. I had interviews at Bay State, Henry Ford in Detroit, Mayo Clinic, Arizona, Johns Hopkins, University of South Florida. All those are, you now know, schools that, like, if you're interested in general surgery, you should apply for those schools at minimum, because they at least looked at me, which means they would probably look at you. So really, if you know anyone in the upper years as you go through and they do the specialty you do, figure out where they got interviews, talk to them, because selecting places that will accept an IMG is kind of half the battle in America. And I think that's it. There's lots more that I can say, but I think maybe it's better to just go to the question and answers, and you guys can ask your individual questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zach Stickney. I'll now hand off the floor for Natalagia, our education lead for the 221-222, to lead the Q&A session.
Good evening. I would like to thank you all for being here tonight, and I would like to extend a huge thank you to our speakers, Dr. Lozano and Dr. Stickney, for the wonderful presentations. Up next is our Q&A session. We asked the members of Surgical Society to submit any questions that they had for our speakers. We will now go through those submitted questions. If anyone in the audience has more questions that haven't been addressed in the session, please write them in the chat and these will be addressed after. So I will share my screen now with the Q&A submitted questions. One moment. All right, could someone just confirm that you can see the slides?
Yes.
All right, so the first question for our speakers is, what are the must-know suture techniques when entering FY1?
Zach can probably speak better to this. I actually didn't end up doing a lot of like suturing on my electives because in neurosurgery, like things are very, I don't know, at least at Beaumont, like a lot of the surgeons are very involved in their own surgeries, and then you know, the regs are the next in line for sort of doing things. So I didn't get a lot of hands-on opportunities for suturing. But I mean, like, there's certain sort of standard suturing types of sutures that everyone should know, like just the basic, like simple interrupted suture, running subcuticular suture, mattress sutures like horizontal and vertical mattress, and then you should probably know how to do like hand tying. But Zach, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that's true. The biggest one would be a running subcuticular suture, just like the running back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I didn't really do any interrupted in theater. You might do like a single stitch, just like close a laparoscopic port. But a running suture would be the main one, and doing like a single stitch for closing laparoscopic ports, and then part of that would be knowing how to tie your suture, so doing a one-hand or a two-hand tie, which is really easy once you do it one time, but then the first time you're doing it, it's going to be really frustrating, like the tying. So just watch some YouTube videos, or if you have someone that you know who's already knows how to do it, have them like physically show you it, because if you do it one time, you'll be fine. But the first time I just like couldn't get it, and then it became easy. So.
Yep, I'm sure that our skills team is definitely taking notes on that advice, and they will be sure to make some sessions with those types of sutures. The next question is, how do you balance showing enthusiasm without being overbearing or too eager?
I would say, for me, like, basically whenever they ask you, do you want to do this, or something is going on, you basically, that means you're going to do it. Like if one of the residents says like, oh, there's a cool case going on, like in theater, whatever, that's basically them saying like, go to that case. But like who's ever asking this question, like you are identifying that correctly, that there is a fine balance between like overly being keen and then being like sort of annoying. It's something that you just have to sort of feel out. Basically, if you start to sense that the residents are have the slightest hint of like negativity towards you, you kind of had to back off. That's what I found.
Yeah, I think that's all right. And then the one thing I would add is just like, if you want to do something, best way to do things is like, if you really want to suture, or if you really want to take bloods, like talk to the resident or talk to the consultant, and be like, hey, like, if it would be appropriate, this is something I would really like to try, with that big, like, if it was appropriate, so they don't feel bad if they say, no, I don't have time. And then if they say yes, then great, you get to go do the skill or do it later. And if they say no, then you're like, oh, that's fine, like, I totally understand. And then you bump onto someone else the next day who hopefully will show you it. So yeah, definitely you kind of have to be a little like, hey, I want to do this, or because some people will just not let you do things unless you say I want to do it. But if people say no, then you're like, that's fine,
Okay, and the next question is, what is your main advice for preclinical year students?
Anki. just study for boards. Like, just put your head down. Don't get caught up with like what's going to happen later with stuff. Like, as I was saying, one sand dune, like, study a lot and start early. Don't study for step one. Don't start studying for step one in the summer. Start a year before the summer. Like, every weekend, be doing a second question bank, doing Anki. Like, it's something that you just slow burn, and then at the end, that last summer is like the end of the match, catch on fire, and then you know everything.
Yeah, I don't really have much else to add. Just like focus on the things that matter. Like Zach was saying at that time, there's no point if you're a preclinical student right now. Like, there's honestly not that much point in worrying about like electives and things. Like, right now, your job is to just do as well as you can on your like med school grades and board exams.
Okay, and the next question is time management tips on how to balance study with other activities.
I would just say, you have to have like a routine, you know, like you have to have a routine for like during, I assume this is like preclinical. Well, you kind of have to have a routine for like during the normal year and then during the summer when you're studying for steps. They're totally different routines. I think there are talks on both of those things, respectively, so I won't go into that. But like, you definitely have to have a plan that you stick to. Because if you don't, you'll get really behind. But part of a plan is scheduling in things you like. Like, I would always go to the gym, you know, even if I wasn't exactly where I needed to be, because like that's an important part of me, like relaxing. So having a plan with a lot of sad studying, well, it's actually kind of fun, but then and some happy activity there for an hour or two a day.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Zach. Like getting into a really good routine is probably the best thing that you can do. And give yourself like realistic milestones, like every week or every month you want to, you know, check off a box and sort of look back and see what you accomplished. Another thing is like sleep is very important, and go to bed early. Like, it makes such a difference. And once you get to like, you know, clinical years and you're going to be in the hospital and stuff, like you have to wake up early. You know, when I was in SC1, our rotations would start at like, you know, 8 or whatever, and I would wake up and do like an hour or two of like UWorld before even going on my rotation, and I already had that done when I was like really fresh at the beginning of the day. So like, go to bed early is the key.
Okay, and the next question then is, what year in medicine would you recommend considering an elective?
So I assume whoever asked this is probably like in a younger year or an earlier on in their career. So basically, like, you only can do electives, like clinical electives, in your senior years, and specifically at RCSI, that's SC2. Like, when you say an elective, if you mean something like research, then I would say you should be doing research like from the beginning of your medical school journey. But like a clinical elective specifically, that can only be done after SC1, because for other universities and hospitals to take you on as a student, you have to have done core rotations in like GP, psychiatry, obstetrics, et cetera, so that can only be done after SC1.
I did like an observership after my Gem 1 year, where like you don't do anything clinical because you're not like able to, but I kind of just like shadowed a general surgeon for 2 weeks in the summer, and I was kind of trying to do some research also. If you're like doing research for summer, it's not bad to do like a shadowing like early on, not for like a letter of recommendation, it's not for anything of that, but you might help you decide like what surgical field you're interested in, because you won't rotate in everything in RCSI. So you kind of have to figure it out a little bit before, or because then when you get there, you can tell RCSI, oh, I want to do this or I want to do that, or do your electives in that. But if you don't already know I want to do orthopedics or neuro, and it gets that summer, then you don't know what to apply to. So you can do little week observerships.
Okay, and then the next question is, how do you impress and ask for letters of recommendation?
I think I touched on this in my talk, but first week of your elective, be upfront. Like every program director, every person there knows like why medical students are on rotations. Like it's to get a job, hopefully. So it's not offensive to be like, hey, like I would really like to earn your letter of recommendation. Like they know the deal, you know. So be upfront about it and be like, what can I do to earn it? And then for sure follow up and do those things. Because if you wait till the last week and then the person's like, well, I don't really even know you, we've only been in one surgery together, then you're going to get a bad letter. So, yeah.
Yeah, and just to build on that, when you are asking for like a letter, like at first you sort of just like bring it up, but once they agree to write you a letter, you want to make things as easy as possible for them. And some like different people will have sort of different philosophies about this, but like some people ask you to sort of write a template for them, and then they'll like fill it in. Some people just want you to like give them your CV, and they'll sort of formulate their letter based off your CV. So just be like very helpful and very clear about like how you can help them write the letter.
And then, how did you decide to pursue a surgical residency as opposed to a non-surgical residency?
I think that's something that you feel out. Like, I think for me, like, I did an engineering undergrad. I liked kind of like using like the physical and like kind of like building sense, and like also just being away from the wards for 2 days a week were all like alluring to me. I mean, like surgery is about like often it's about like solving problems, and it's not like, for me, medicine was more like, you know, patching up a leaking tank. That's not always the case, but like that's my simple soon-to-be surgeon brain. So that like appealed to me. But like, you know, that's something you'll also get a feel for when you do rotations, and you'll be like, oh, I absolutely hate this, or I like this medicine clinic. You'll have a good sense by your kind of first year of rotations.
Yeah, so definitely agree with Zach. I'm more sort of I guess the attractiveness of surgery to me was sort of the immediate benefit of helping a patient like then and there, and having like a remarkable effect on their life. That was sort of the reason why I was interested in surgery. And like for neurosurgery, for like people may not know, but like my dad is a neurosurgeon, and that was sort of like the main, I guess, inspiration for me. I just thought it was amazing, the kind of stuff that he did, and if you have a mentor in your life that does something for you that's really inspiring, that you should follow that, and it can lead to a great career, hopefully.
And what are future goals you wish to achieve during your residency?
I definitely want to leave residency feeling like comfortable in the operating theater, and being someone who like takes time to listen to patients. I think sometimes surgeons just there to rush, like can be quick with people. So I think that'll be hard to like do when you're working a lot. But I think those are important things. I don't really know, to be honest. I don't want to pursue academic medicine. So I just want to practice. So I don't have big lofty goals. But Chris might. He's kind of more academic, so I'll let him talk.
I mean, I'm still sort of figuring it out. In my program, they sort of really want people to be in academics, and I definitely would consider that. But it is like a long road. Like, it's going to be a long residency, and then if you're in academics, like you probably have to do a graduate research degree, like a master's or a PhD. So that's something I'm considering, but we'll see what unfolds. Like if in like 5 or 6 years, if I'm really up for that challenge. So yeah.
Okay, and then how do you get published in surgical research?
Might be a better question for Chris. I actually don't have any personal authorships on surgical papers. I did a lot of kind of published stuff in college, but it wasn't surgical. I have my name on Surg is actually really good. I was talking about that. You can Google it, but like someone above me, who I think one of these surgical talks, literally told me just go do Surg. It's a big like check a box. It's a big audit. You go and do like kind of chart collections, and like someone else, it's like there's like thousands of students in the world over UK, Ireland, Australia. So like I didn't have to write anything for it, but like my name is on the audit, and you can talk about it. But anything I published personally was in college. That was before, so maybe you have something to add there, Chris.
So I would just say that you want to get involved in research early on. You might feel like you don't have the expertise, or it's very intimidating to start research, but the truth is, like, as a student, you're not really going to be making groundbreaking discoveries or anything. You're more of like a laborer or like a workhorse in a greater picture of someone's lab or someone's project. And so, like what Zach was saying, a really good idea is to get involved on like audits or sort of like chart review type things, where the barrier to entry into those is very low. Basically, you can go to any consultant at like Beaumont, say, and say to them like, hey, I'm interested in like neurosurgery. I'm early on. I don't have a lot of skills, but I would be really happy to collect data for a project, if you have any projects ongoing. And then once you get your foot in the door with something like that, they basically have to include your name on a paper if you've contributed to it. So like it doesn't matter how little like amount of work you've done. Obviously, you want to contribute to the paper, but if you've spent a few weeks like pulling charts and collecting data, like writing down patient demographics, things like that, you're going to be included on whatever paper comes out of that data. So that would be my recommendation. Just like reach out and there's also really good like research like presentations that have been given at RCSI that you should be able to find, and those have really good tips.
Okay, and any tips on competing in surgical case competitions?
I never did. Did you, Chris?
So I competed in the Surgical Society Senior Case Competition back in like March or whatever it was. I didn't win, which I was very upset. No, just joking. I think basically you have to find a case that is interesting for some reason. Like when you get to sort of higher end like competitions like this, like the bread and butter stuff doesn't really fly anymore. I think the girl that won, she presented this new type of like thoracic, like sort of this new type of surgery that's never been done before in Ireland. So you need to find a case that's really interesting, has some kind of novelty to it, and you just have to like practice and really know your stuff. Like For my case personally, I made the presentation, and then I presented it to some of the residents in neurosurgery at Beaumont and got their feedback. And then I actually presented it to the consultant who was, the consultant on the case I was presenting, and got his feedback on it. You just, practice makes perfect.
Okay, and that was the last of the submitted questions. I'm going to take a look in the chat right now to see if people submitted any additional questions. Okay. 1 second. Okay, so first question is, what resources did you use to learn about different surgical approaches and procedures beforehand?
I didn't really use anything in particular. I honestly would just Google it. If there was a paper off the top that explained, the statistics or the epidemiology of the problem, like a hernia or something. And then if you have up to date is really good for understanding the why the surgery's done, the problem behind it, and the other possible surgical, the non-surgical or the other surgeries they might do for it. And then, but if it's a laparoscopic cholecystectomy, you can just Google laparoscopic cholecystectomy image, and you'll see there'll be really good diagrams of people lifting the liver and cutting the gallbladder. So it's if you have that image in your mind when you go in, then when you see it, you're okay, I know what's going on.
I see that Professor Carol has her hand raised, so you can unmute yourself and ask the question, Prof. Carol.
Thank you very much. And I don't want to hold up the floor, but just to say that the two newly appointed residents have given us a very clear understanding of what is required to match successfully. And I've just written down some of the comments that Zach and Chris have made. It's very important to have a good work-life balance. And I always think that the GEM students have a very difficult time when they arrive at RCSI. I interview people for the program, and we constantly say you have to hit the ground running, but you also have to have a good work-life balance, particularly if you're going to engage in a career in surgery. So, Zach, you mentioned that you can study, but then you go to the gym. So RCSI were appointed last year as #1 in the world for well-being. I hope you take that with you to your program. Chris, you also mentioned getting up an hour before your program started to study. That's very good, and that's very important. And when you go to do your elective, being on time, presenting yourself, but also having some camaraderie with the residents, because you don't want to appear like a robot. And I was surprised that, I think, was it you, Zach, mentioned, don't engage with banter with the residents. When I was an elective student in Richmond, Virginia, I think I was in senior cycle 1 in 1983. There was a lot of banter with the residents. Maybe they liked our Irish accents, or I liked their accents from the deep south. But I wonder why you say that. But also, you did mention, be kind and friendly with the nurses. They are your friends. If you annoy them, if you don't get on well with them, both your elective time and your residency years will be hellish. I would suggest to everybody tuning in today, if you think about surgery, when you arrive at RCSI, join a society that reflects your interest. And it is good to be a member of at least one. Lots, I agree, is not beneficial, but join one, engage, present at the meetings, and that really does give you an insight and help you when you go on to get your letters of recommendation. Chris and Zach, I wish you the best. I hope to again see you in the future, and the world is your oyster. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. And I think just to clarify a point, like definitely like you want to have a bit of crack with the residents. Like you want to get on with them. I think the thing to be you should just be careful of negative banter. Like if one resident is shit talking another one and being like, oh, they're so lazy. Like you don't want to be like, oh yeah, they suck. That kind of thing. That kind of thing can get you in trouble. So you can get involved in some positive banter as long as you don't look unprofessional in front of one of the consultants or something, but just avoid any of the negative stuff, because a lot of what residents do is shit talk other residents.
Yeah, that I should have clarified when I talked about that. I think it is very important for you to come off as human and realistically they're trying to see if you're someone that they can work with, for 4, 5, 6 years, right? So you want to be friendly, you want to be engaging, but as Zach said, it's more when they're making jokes about each other, you don't want to pile on to at someone else's expense. You're not in that state of relationship with them where you can put someone else down. You are the student. You're the bottom of the pile. And even if they're making fun of you, you can't really push back at them. I would say you sort of just take it. And then once you are a resident, you'll be much more integrated and in a position to make jokes towards your other coworkers.
Okay, and the next question in the chat is asking if the meeting is being recorded, and it is. We will send an email later on about how everyone can access the recording. The next question is for Chris. It's more directed towards neurosurgery. It says, when did your interest in neurosurgery begin? As a younger medical student directly from high school, one doesn't typically get exposed to the field until rotations. However, you mentioned the importance of a long-standing interest, so I was wondering how yours started. Thank you in advance for the great talks.
So yeah, thanks for the question. So I'm in a particularly, I guess, unique situation where, I had a mentor in neurosurgery from very early on, and that's where my exposure started. I would, shadow my dad probably when I was doing my undergrad. So about 8 years ago is when I started having exposure to neurosurgery. If you're, in first year or second year of medical school now, now is the time to really explore it. If you think that this is something that you would possibly be interested in, then you should by all means reach out to someone at Beaumont, for example, and say hey, I'm interested in learning more about neurosurgery. And the consultants at Beaumont are amazing to expose students. They love having students in theater. They're all very friendly. I can recommend you reach out to Mr. David O'Brien. He loves having students. He's very friendly. Funny enough, actually, Zach and I we're on a neurosurgery rotation together with Mr. O'Brien, and I'm sure Zach can attest that he's like an amazing, welcoming person.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Okay, the next question is, how many times did you go through first aid before step 1?
I think if you're worried about step 1 stuff, you should attend the AMSA step 1 talk. I will say that there's no right answer. I read 1 page of first aid and hated it and never opened it again and did very well in step. So there's different methods. You don't have to read first aid if you don't want it, but it is a good way to kind of make sure you hit every topic. But go to the AMSA step 1 talk. They always have people talk every year, and they'll lay out an exact different plans that people use. Chris, you can add to that if you want.
Yeah, I'm the same as Zach. I didn't really use first aid. I used first aid as a syllabus of this is everything I need to know. But I didn't necessarily read first aid from front to back. I would just look things up as a reference quickly. But like Zach said, you just got to find what works for you. I know a few people that they study exclusively from first aid. I personally used Anki, the Zanki deck. So yeah, it's not a one size fits all for sure.
And if you're early and you're year 1 or 2 in medicine right now, everything is about working smarter, not harder. I mean, you're gonna have to work hard anyway, but if you don't have to read the first aid book just because it's what other people do. If you have another way to working and you're learning, really explore the different options. Don't just put your head down and plow through something that's not working. If you're not learning, it's not worth your time. Time is your probably most limited resource for the next 20 years of your life, so use it wisely.
And the next question is, what advice do you have for younger students in terms of getting research, particularly for students who came straight from high school and don't have research experience?
I think we sort of covered that. Again, just reach out to a consultant at Beaumont, or if you're from North America, getting research back home is ideal. But it's never too late to start, and there's no job that's too low for you. Literally the first research thing I did was I went on PubMed and typed in a search and looked at all the papers that were returned by that search and just put that into an Excel document. That was my first research project. That resulted in a publication. So there's nothing too trivial for you to start off with.
And the next question is asking, on the topic of research, do you plan to continue to pursue research during your residencies or solely focus on your training, as that alone is very demanding?
I think that most residencies demand some level of research from the residents. I think it would be pretty uncommon for someone to go through residency and not be on at least a couple papers. I'm definitely someone that's going to kind of wait for topics I'm interested in and not go out and pursue a bunch of research because it's not what I'm really into. But I think as a resident, most schools will expect you to A, read literature, and then B, contribute to it even in a small way. But I think there are easy ways to do that because you're seeing the patients that they're actually conducting the study on, so it's way easier.
Yeah, and some programs will have built-in research. So for my program, P2Y4 is a dedicated research year, and then people will take time off if they want to do a graduate degree, a master's or a PhD. They take that time off and then they come back later. But what Zach was saying is quite common. like you might just have an interesting case and you just write a quick case study, and that doesn't take all that much effort. Like that's you know, you don't have to dedicate like a whole year to do something like that.
And was there anything that was part of the individual application packages for North American electives that surprised you? I.e., is there anything you wish you had been working on sooner during SC1 running up to that summer?
Not really. SC1 is like so busy by itself with step 2 and all that. I would say just focus on step 2, and for your electives, I would apply to like Mayo Clinic, look at North Carolina, look if you have a local hospital that has like a non-VSAS application, because those schools you can apply to and secure electives so much earlier that then if you have those like locked down, then you don't feel like worried that you're in the void like 1 month before the summer starts. But that's pretty much it. I mean, they're going to ask, like, for the actual application, they're going to basically, do you have a criminal record, and are you vaccinated? So, like, there's elective stock, though, that AMSA and I think SIMSA gives, so that will be very helpful for all the documents that you need.
Yeah, I would just say there was nothing that surprised me. It was more just like what Zach was saying, do your research beforehand. And like I discovered like the University of Colorado, I was going to do a rotation there before COVID, but you know, I didn't have to go through VSAS. The process was like really simple to apply to it. Like it was just one single application, and it was very straightforward. And then I later even realized that there's actually an RCSI alumnus there in neurosurgery who could like mentor me. So I would say, like, you know, just do your research starting really early on of like the different places that you want to go to.
And the next question is, what is your number one tip for step 1 studying during dedicated?
I think we sort of touched on this, but for me, the number one tip is have a routine. You know, make sure you're getting up at the same time every day, and just you know, start off by doing like a UWorld question bank block, or do like Anki or whatever it is, and schedule in breaks. Like know when you're taking a break each day. Like Zach was saying, like schedule in the gym or going for a run, and no matter how much work you got done that day, always like do your break, or always go to the gym, or always go for your run. It's very important for the longevity of your study session and your mental health to, like, you know, do that. And like I was saying, always, you know, get enough sleep. Like force yourself to go to bed early, because it's very important.
Yeah, I second that. I think if it's still ways off, go to the AMSA Step 1 talk, because they'll have like someone will lay out like, this is the exact schedule I used, and I like copied and pasted it before the summer of Step 1. Like I had every single day at least loosely planned. You know, it wasn't like I just showed up and did whatever. Like I had a plan, and it was also probably like my healthiest summer ever. Like I got 8 hours sleep every night, went to the gym every day. So you can, and you know, took one Sunday afternoons off every time to like go chill, do an activity. So you just have to really plan it out. And I encourage you to like talk to someone who did it and had a good plan, because you can just take their plan. Like that's what I did, modify it a little bit.
Okay, and I think that was the last question for the Q&A session. Thank you very much, Dr. Lozano and Dr. Stickney. So I will now hand off the floor to Connor Sheehan, our Vice President, for closing remarks.
Hi, thanks, Natalia. So my name's Connor Sheehan. I'm the Vice President for the Society for this upcoming year. And I just wanted to close things out by speakers, Dr. Lozano and Dr. Stickney, for their insights, time, words of wisdom, and lessons learned throughout your time as medical students in the college. I think to say there's a huge group of students here tonight that feel a tremendous boost in confidence as they prepare for their surgical rotations and aspirations to one day stand on the other side of the sand dune where you're both standing today. From everyone here at the Society, wish you both all the best of success in the world as you begin your long-awaited professional careers, and we look forward to hearing from you again in the near future. Thanks to everyone joining us here tonight, particularly our colleagues from RCSI Bahrain. And with that said, enjoy the rest of your morning, evening, or afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
And feel free to reach out, anyone that's here, if you have any more questions.
Yeah, I'll put my email just in the chat here, so if you ever want to